Crimson Crossover Network. This is The Tide Machine with Charles Branch and Michael Southern. Welcome into The Tide Machine. I am Charles Branch, joined always with Michael Southern. Big win, big early morning win for Alabama up in Como last week as Alabama took down number 14 Missouri 27-24. Got a little tight there in the end, but Michael, great way to start the Saturday morning and watch another college football throughout Saturday. But give me your thoughts about Alabama's big win against Missouri this past weekend.
That was just a typical grinded out game you got to win. It's just one of those ones you got to tough it out. I thought they did great given the circumstances. You had players go out with injuries. You had some players not 100%, and they just found a way to win. And that's life in the SEC. So if you're not mentally tough, this conference will break you. And you're seeing that with other teams. And so far, right now, with the grind that Alabama's been in, they haven't let up. Yeah, the games have been close. The games have been, white knuckle affairs. But at the end of the day, Alabama's been the more mentally tougher team than their opponents.
Well, talking about being mentally tougher, I mean, that was shown on the second play of scrimmage from Alabama's offense. Give Missouri credit. They had the off week. They put together a really good game plan. We didn't necessarily come out ready on defense. I think Coach Womack kind of talked about that in the press conference today as well. But they had us third and long, and their captain, defensive end, decides to go and taunt our wide receiver, gets a 15-yard penalty, gives us a fresh set of downs. I mean, it reminded me, and I don't know if you remember this, but in 2014, playing Ohio State in the Sugar Bowl, when we were up 21-6, we kicked the ball off. I think we stopped Ohio State within inside the 15-yard line. And I feel comfortable talking about this because Maurice Smith eventually would transfer to Georgia. So, but he goes and taunts the Ohio State player 15 yards. They get the ball out to 30. And you remember that's when they had Cardale Jones being on their third quarterback, and it completely changed the game. And unfortunately, as we know, Ohio State would not only go on to win that game, but win the national championship. And I remember when that play happened on Saturday, where it just gave us a new life, and credit to our offense marching it down the field and tying the game up. But it was a play that I do feel like, even as early as it was, did change the game. And obviously we took advantage of it, and just got to give a lot of credit to our guys for that mental toughness, even in the second half too, when things weren't really going our way, making the plays that we needed to come out on top. And I felt like you could kind of see it in the Missouri players' eyes towards the end of the game. You could kind of see it with some of their reactions when they weren't making plays on that last drive. They just didn't look confident that they were going to be able to put a drive together to either tie or win the game in the final minutes, as we were winning 27-24 there at the end.
Well, that's what happens when you're really not tested and you're like 5 games in the season and you have yet to have a road game. So, look, Alabama's already battle tested. They won in Athens. They had a revenge game, if you want to call it, against Vanderbilt, and then they stayed. Look, they kept the mentality, they kept the professionalism, and they did what they had to do on the road in a hostile environment. Again, kudos to the coaching staff. Yeah, that opening drive was a little concerning the way they came down so quickly, but they bounced right back, answered for that. Yes, was it a perfect game? Absolutely not. But I was very satisfied with the effort and just the mental toughness from this team. What was the thing that everyone was worried about after game one? This team's not tough. This team is weak. Well, I don't think that's the case anymore. They have responded and answered the bell. They don't need to stop now. Let's just keep building on that and just don't stop.
I know I texted you about it. First time as a conference opponent that Missouri has held a lead on Alabama. And still their offense is not, since joining the SEC, their offense has not run a snap of football leading Alabama in a football game. So obviously that was, that using that play again, where they got us third and long. If we don't get a first down, and they get the ball up 7-0, maybe it does completely change the complexion of the game. And we have to play a little bit more on our heels, maybe similar to kind of how the Vanderbilt game was last year. I mean, not necessarily coming off of a pick six, but you could tell they were amped up. They were excited, but a great job by our guys weathering the storm and being able to get out of there with a big victory. And speaking of big, continuing to find ways to use Caden Proctor Loved him in I don't know if you can call it Wildcat. Do you call it like I don't even know what a bear package or something like
Uh,
that, but
yeah,
you
he's
know,
bigger than a wildcat.
yeah. Well, I did notice that when they snapped it to him, it wasn't a direct snap from Parker Brailsford through his legs. It was more of that side snap, so maybe he could catch it a little bit easier. And we had the line unbalanced to the left side, so he could get a little bit more momentum. I think we're setting up at some point for Caden Proctor to throw a touchdown pass this year on the goal line.
He's either going to throw a touchdown or he's definitely going to score one or the other. Something's going to give before the end of the year. I liked it when he broke left. Look, for someone as large as he is, he's nice and agile on his feet for his size. So he's shown some agility on all these plays that they've done. And I agree with you. You're probably right. There's one more in the playbook out there where he's going to drop back and try to throw a touchdown pass to somebody.
Well, and to think that when Coach Saban retired and Coach DeBoer came in, Caden was headed back to Iowa, going to play for the Hawkeyes, spent the spring up in Iowa, but has come back to Alabama. And I think he can look back on it now and not just getting the offensive touches, but he's got to sit back and say this was the right decision for me. And not just from, you know, team success and all that. But what Coach Saban was so good at as well, even in that early part of the NIL area, it's what's the value creating yourself outside of college? Caden Proctor, even if he'd gone to Iowa, is probably still going to be a first round pick, but he's still going to be on being in Alabama and the looks that he's getting and playing in the offense that he is, and now he's how he's being used. His numbers just continue to go up as far as that first contract in the NFL once, I assume, after he declares this year for the NFL draft.
Well, I mean, outside of just being the left tackle, these offensive plays that Grubb and DeBoer have been kind of working into, as I mentioned, it's showing off his agility in other areas. So I guarantee you there's a lot of pro scouts looking at that and say, I didn't realize he was that athletic for his size. So definitely working his way up. Not that he wasn't already a first round draft pick, but he may be moving up pretty high in the first round at this point. If he keeps progressing and they keep utilizing him and just, things progress the way they are for the rest of the season for him.
Well, and I know our older Alabama fans, this isn't new to them as far as in a tackle being involved in the offense and being involved in the offensive line. Back in the mid 60s when Jerry Duncan was playing at Alabama as an undersized tackle, Ray Perkins would be split out at wide receiver, but Coach Bryant would use at that time a tackle eligible play. And Jerry Duncan got a lot of plays for Alabama and made some big catches during his time, excuse me, during his time at Alabama on that 1966 team that would eventually should have been a national championship team, but uh, but because of the 10-10 tie, Alabama would finish number 3 in the country that year. But that's a play that actually was so successful at Alabama that they would eventually change the rules 2 years later because of all the other coaches complaining about it and what Coach Bryant was doing.
It's always it's funny if you look at it through the decades, how many rules are added simply because of something that the Alabama coaching staff, regardless of which coaching staff it was, that they found not a loophole, but they just found some creativity. So the Saban rule, the bump rule, Saban then does video conference. I mean, it's just go back. It happens like every decade, something like that happens. So I won't say that they just pick on Alabama, but everyone's watching when Alabama is a trendsetter, and they're going to do whatever they can to curb that. How about that?
Oh, talking about analysts and support staff and things like that, for sure. They will find a way to try to curtail it for Alabama and try to make it balance for everybody else, but they're always a step behind. Well, as I was researching Jerry Duncan, I actually came across an article written by Joey Blackwell, who's some Crimson Crossover fans. They'll know that name, part of our Crimson Crossover basketball podcast. He wrote this article in 2020 talking about Jerry Duncan, and it's kind of ties right into what is this week, Alabama playing Tennessee. One of Jerry Duncan's favorite moments was Alabama's 11-10 win over Tennessee in Neyland Stadium back in 1966. And what he told Joey in that article is they came into halftime down 10-0. It was muddy, it was rainy, they were whipped, they were irritated, and they were told even before they got to Knoxville, Tennessee's going to be up 7-0. So basically they were feeling like they were down 17-0 and can we come out and, find a way to win this game? And he said Coach Bryant comes in the dressing room and clapping his hands and says, clapping his hands like Kirby Smart, I guess, and says, "Hey, this is perfect. This is perfect. We've got them right where we want them. They actually think they're going to win this thing, and we're sitting to, what did he just say?" And they go out there and they win the game 11-10 with Kenny Stabler having a big run for a touchdown in that game as well.
Well, Coach Bryant used to always say, it's an old phrase he used to say, he never really knew what kind of team he had until they played Tennessee. He always used that as the measuring stick of how tough is this team, how successful can this team be, because he had so much respect for the program that they had at Tennessee, and that's part of the reason why the rivalry is so deep and why it means so much to a lot of the older generation Alabama fans. It means as much and maybe more to beat Tennessee than Auburn. Now that trend flips with the younger generation. And I'm kind of like right down the middle. I don't like either one of them. So I want to beat them both. I won't say that it means more to me to beat Tennessee than Auburn or vice versa. I just don't like either one of them. So I want both. But it does mean a lot to that older generation simply because it is a very long-standing, deep rival and tradition that we have against playing Tennessee.
Well, and there's a lot of hatred that goes back and forth between both programs. And I think to the point that you're making, we had that run where we won 15 straight against Tennessee. So for a lot of the younger generation, it's just, yeah, Tennessee's another team on the schedule like Arkansas or Mississippi State or Vanderbilt, where we have had battles back and forth with Auburn and have come up on the short side a few times in the more recent history. But this is a series that, even with Alabama leading the series 60, 39, and 8, it's been a series of streaks.
Yep.
It's gone a little bit more back and forth, obviously, in these past 3, 4 games. But it is a game where I don't know the gentleman's name that for the video that's been floating around now for however many years, but it is, you dislike Auburn, you hate Tennessee.
Well, that video was recorded in 2007. It's a classic. It will be replayed every year during Tennessee Hate Week for eternity. For as long as Alabama and Tennessee play, that video is going to surface on the Alabama side. It's great. Look, I never took for granted one of any of those victories during Coach Saban's streak, simply because I lived through the losing streaks against Johnny Majors in the '80s, and then of course that horrible 7-game losing streak against Phil Fulmer. I know we've got some commentary we're going to make about him later, but that was a miserable time. Those 7 years were dark times for the program. He was so afraid of Alabama. He was going to do anything he can, whether it be above board, below board, in secrecy, to bury the program. And at the end of the day, his shenanigans actually led to his downfall. So I find it poetic justice that Alabama pulled the nuclear option, hired Nick Saban, and he just ran Phil Fulmer out within like 2 years.
Yeah, let's just call it how it is. Philip Fulmer's a scumbag.
Yes, yes, he is. He
I
is
have no
not.
problem
Yep.
saying that.
Nope. Nope.
Yeah,
I agree.
I mean, as we were talking about it beforehand, he got his job. He was successful as an interim coach for when Johnny Majors was recovering for heart surgery. But I read where during that time, he called the athletic director 26 times. They eventually would push Johnny Majors out, which Johnny Majors is a Tennessee legend as well, and had very successful stints coaching in Tennessee. He obviously then did have the run. Philip Fulmer had the run against us while he was there, won 7 straight. For a lot of what the younger generation may not be familiar with was the whole NCAA fiasco back in the early 2000s, where he was a secret witness, fabricating a lot of information, giving information to NCAA investigator Steve Johannesmeyer about what was going on at Alabama while he was doing the same thing as well. And it really is kind of poetic that this streak started when he was still the Tennessee coach. Um, his 7-game streak against Alabama ended in 2002 when all these reports were coming out that he was the secret witness. And Tennessee, as we know, would go on to lose 15 straight times against Alabama. So I know they probably love him from his national championship in 1998, but I'll say it again. Phillip Fulmer's a scumbag, and he not only ruined the Tennessee program, but as you said, helped Alabama prop its program up and go to new heights because of where our program got to, partly because of that NCAA investigation.
Well, he helped drive Alabama to its lowest point ever, to where eventually Alabama had enough, and they pulled out all the stops to do whatever was necessary from a above board manner, not underhanded manner, not stabbing anybody in the back or anything like that to get the job. And I just find it so poetic that the program he wanted to bury is the one that ultimately caused his demise. I take great satisfaction in that. And I don't know how the old Tennessee alums feel. I'm sure there's still a small faction of older fans who maybe have somewhat of a dislike for Phil Fulmer. Of course, that national championship kind of washes that away, but I'm sure there's still a faction up there that have fond memories of Johnny Majors, and they remember what happened in '92, and they probably don't think that's the best thing or the best look for their program during that period.
Well, and I think a lot of the reason why Jeremy Pruitt got hired at Tennessee was Philip Fulmer again trying to stick it to Alabama. And then when it went sideways, he had no problem. He and Tennessee had no problem trying to throw Jeremy Pruitt under the bus as well. So there is no love lost between a lot of these Alabama and Tennessee fans. I'll say it again, Philip Fulmer's a scumbag, and Tennessee has been getting what they deserve because of him being their coach and some of the shenanigans that he pulled.
I hope the lingering effects of all the malfeasance that he did there last for another 10, 20 years. That's perfectly fine with me. I have no problem with that.
Yeah, well, one of the games that we wanted to talk about that the scumbag was on the sideline for was the 2002 Alabama game. It was in Knoxville. It's when we did stop the streak. I was actually at that game, but first I want to send it to you for your comments and what you remember from that 2002 game.
So I was at the game too. I was actually covering it for the Tuscaloosa News. Funny story. Cecil Hurt and I drove up there. Back in those days, we would put out the Saturday morning edition late Friday night for the high school coverage. So I remember Cecil and I stayed late that Friday to put out the high school edition, and then he and I rode together up to Knoxville, and we got into Tennessee probably at about 3 a.m. And then I remember we had a hotel, we crashed. Cecil had to get up early because he had a radio interview. And then it was a night game. So then we had lunch, and then we met up with Tommy D's, and then we kind of made our way in there slowly in the afternoon. But I remember the feeling from the Alabama fans there in the stadium, the relief. The Alabama starts to play with a fumble return for a touchdown. But remember that Tennessee team, that more than likely that should have been one of their best teams ever. That would have been the recruiting class coming off their national championship team, and you would have thought they would have had a great recruiting class. But that was a satisfying moment. Uh, Finally ended the streak. And granted, Dennis Franchione, obviously, we had some issues there after the season, but that was a sweet victory. And then, yes, in the post game, you could smell the victory cigars coming out of the locker room. Not only could you smell the victory cigars, let's just say that they had a twisted version of Rocky Top the players were singing in the locker room, and you could hear it before they let the media in. How about that? I don't. I This is a PG rated podcast, so I can't recite some of the lyrics that I heard standing outside when they were singing. They had some colorful language that they inserted into Rocky Top, but it was a great time. All in all, great time.
It really was a great time. So I guess I was eighth grade at the time, and the week of the Alabama Tennessee game, I'd actually fractured my wrist. So I'd just gotten a cast on. Was kind of down about that, but we were in Knoxville for the game. Like you said, it was a night game. And that first touchdown was they were trying to throw a swing pass that was just behind the quarterback. I think it was Gerald Dixon picks
It
it
was
up,
Gerald Dixon.
runs it all the way back. And I mean, that place was booing. Philip Fulmer, who's a scumbag, was going crazy on the sidelines. But we, of course, of Alabama fans were loving it. And I think one of my favorite plays from this rivalry was they were going away. Alabama was going away from us. So if you're watching the game on TV, they're going from left to right. So we're behind Alabama's offense. Brody Croyle and Tyler Watts were rotating at times during that game. Brody, I think, drops back to pass, gets sacked, or He's literally laying on the ground with the ball. He pitches it to Santonio Beard, who is also laying on the ground and has the ball. Santonio Beard gets up, runs 40 yards down to the 10-yard line. The officials never blew the play dead or anything, so we end up having the ball down there on the 10-yard line. Well, as you can imagine, Phillip Fulmer, who's a scumbag, was just going nuts on the sidelines. But that was, the Gerald Dixon play, the officials called correctly. I can admit that one wasn't called correctly, but I guess it was called correctly since they gave it to us. But that was a game we ended up cruising, and it was a great feeling for really for my first time. I know I'd been alive since Alabama had beaten Tennessee before, obviously in '92 and earlier games before that, but really the first time to witness Alabama beating Tennessee. And that's also coming off of a lot of hype in 1999 when that team was so good and Sean Alexander was in the Heisman race and really thinking that was going to be the time that we got Tennessee only 3 years later to get them in Knoxville with some of those plays occurring. It was awesome. And you got a better story of being down there near the locker room and how great it was for them. But I know as a young Alabama fan, it was awesome too watching us beat Tennessee.
Well, I really, and Santonio Beard has passed away now, in the last couple of years, but it was really nice to see Santonio do what he did against Tennessee because he was a Tennessee native. I think he was from the Nashville area,
Yep.
and I know it meant a lot for Santonio to be a part of that. And here's the weird thing with the concept of time for a lot of people. So, I lived through, and I remember vividly the 7 years that we went through the horror of the Phil Fulmer rampage against us. And then, of course, I lived through the 15 years that Saban just dominated them. The 7 years that we lost to Tennessee feels twice as long as the 15 years that we beat Tennessee under Saban. That's just the perspective that I have. So I can honestly say I will never forget those 7 years and how miserable they were. No, we could beat Tennessee 30 straight years, and I would still think back to how awful those 7 years were. So
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we got them again in 2005. First time I got to see them win in Tuscaloosa. That was a special game as well. I guess you still would have been covering the
it
team at
was.
that time.
And I think, if I'm not mistaken, that 2005, and again, this is skewed because Alabama played the big games in Legion Field, but that was the first time Alabama had beaten Tennessee in Tuscaloosa since 1930.
Yes.
Because after that, all the games against Tennessee were played at Legion Field. But yes, that look, if you liked offense, that wasn't your game. If you liked defense, that game was for you. If you like special teams, there you go. But another gutsy win. Look, you had already lost Tyrone Prothro. You had already lost him, unfortunately, for the season injury. Well, the career-ending injury, unfortunately, against Florida. So, Alabama just didn't have any big playmakers. So, they had to chip away where they could. The defense played admirably. Remember, that was the defense with Roman Harper, D'Amico Ryans, and those guys. So they kept it close. And then, of course, the famous Rocky block when Roman Harper comes in at the perfect angle, knocks the ball out when it looks like Tennessee's going to go in for the go-ahead touchdown. Alabama gets the touchback. They come right down, and next thing you know, they kick the game winner. So a huge win for Mike Shula, from the Mike Shula era. He had not beaten Tennessee before. And like I said, while it's a skewed stat, it was nice to finally beat Tennessee in Tuscaloosa because you're right. Everyone thought we had a shot in '99, and they came in and won 21-7. And that was still a good Tennessee team in '99. As good as we were, they just matched up. It was a bad matchup for us the way Tennessee played during that era, and for some reason it never was a good matchup for us. That was one of the reasons why they went on that 7-game winning streak against us.
Trying to remember because Prothro got hurt against Florida. The week before we played Tennessee, we beat Ole Miss on a Jamie Christensen kick. He's Jamie Christensen, aka Money, was the one who made the kick for us to win 6-3 against Tennessee. But I'm trying to remember if that was the first home game after Florida, or if there was a Southern Miss or somebody like that squeezed in between there as well.
That's a good question. I can't remember. I will have to go back and look. That one I'm not sure about. I'm not saying it's not. It definitely could be. I'm not 100% sure about that.
Yeah.
But again, the loss of Protho that year was just huge. It's the equivalent of losing Kerry Good in 1984. I mean, you lost your best offensive pop right then and there for the season.
Yeah, you still had DJ Hall and Keith Brown, but they were kind of younger wide receivers. The offensive line was pretty weak that year. Ken Darby did what he could, and we would have some games that we could run the ball a little bit, but just couldn't really protect. I mean, now in this day and age of spread, maybe that team would have been set up a little bit better for a spread type of offense. But yeah, it was a real nail biter game. I remember, Tennessee marching down towards the end of the game. That screen pass that they threw to the tight end, I think it was on a 3rd and long. And had he just gone down right there, it would have been 1st and goal. Would have probably been able to run the clock out and kick a field goal at the end of the game. But of course, Roman Harper makes the hit. Ball goes out of the end zone and we get the ball back, hit DJ Hall on a deep pass on the Tennessee sidelines, and eventually get Jamie Christensen out there to make the kick the field goal and for us to win 6-3. But I remember the excitement from just the for me there was nothing louder than Prothrow's catch against Florida that season, but that Alabama Jamie Christian making that kick, that was pretty close to back in 2005 to beat Tennessee 6-3.
You had two loud moments there at the end. Jamie makes the kick, and then of course Alabama has a pick at the very end of the game to actually end the game. They had a reception, and then you didn't have fans storm the field, but you had people on the sidelines come running on the field.
Next game is when the streak started. It was actually my freshman year in college in 2007. And maybe I don't know to say that the rivalry had taken a dip at that point, but neither team was really, really good at that point because that was an 11 o'clock Jefferson Pilot kickoff. And I don't think either this game has gotten close to being an 11 o'clock Jefferson Pilot kickoff since then.
No, but uh, the best part, well, not best part, but the one of the most memorable things is, Alabama comes out and starts with an onside kick. So they had that plan from the get go. Jamie Christensen, actually during that season, Jamie Christensen was not doing most of the place kicking duties. I believe Tiffin was out there doing it, but uh, everyone knew, like, when Jamie came out for the kickoff, everyone in the press box was like, "Hey, wait a minute, is that Jamie Christensen on the kickoff?" And then they just came right out and bam, as soon as they hit him with the onside kick, everyone's like, "Oh, okay." So yes, they did put in a new wrinkle for this game. Look, Saban thoroughly outcoached Fulmer in that game. They got him with the onside kick, and then it never stopped. Alabama just rolled over them pretty well that day, and that was the start to the 15-game winning streak. That's where it started that morning, and that was another nice victory. It was nice to see. That 2017, had the ups and downs like you expect with the first year coach, but that was definitely one of the highs of 2007.
What I remember from that 2007 game, one, we ended up dominating the game, winning 41-17. But there was a play in the 3rd quarter. So we were up 24-14. Tennessee, I mean, very quickly to end the half, got the ball down the field, kicked a field goal, 24-17. We get the ball to start the second half. I think it was a 3-and-out. I mean, Tennessee got the ball back real quick. They were starting to move it down the field. They were our side of the 50. And Kareem Jackson, first year at Alabama, one of Saban's, first recruits to Alabama. I think Kareem was a junior college player.
No, he was a freshman. He was a true
He
freshman.
was a true freshman.
Yeah, he was a true freshman.
So true freshman, Eric Ainge is the quarterback for Tennessee and throwing a deep pass. I don't know who the wide receiver was, but Kareem Jackson undercuts the route and makes the interception and runs it back a decent amount. And I think we ended up getting a field goal on that drive to make it 27-17. But that was a play that you had not seen Alabama defensive players make over the past however many years. It was kind of I just remember sitting in the stands, and I think my dad even said it too, signaling the types of players that Coach Saban was recruiting. And you're right, Kareem Jackson being a true freshman, that a true freshman could make a play like that. I remember that being one of the things coming away from the game of, yeah, we may be 5-2 right now and 6-2, and disappointed that we couldn't take care of Georgia, couldn't take care of Florida State. But we're starting to get guys into Alabama that are guys that can play in the NFL. Because if I remember correctly, that 2017 would eventually, of the seniors that went into the NFL, none of them got drafted. It's the last time that Alabama has not had a player got drafted. Now, the next year, Andre Smith would get drafted, and I believe some other guys did as well. But that was one of those days you could start seeing the glimpses of the talent changing at Alabama, in my
Yeah,
opinion.
you're right. At the end of the 2007 season, not one player got drafted. Speaking of Kareem Jackson, remember fans gave him a lot of heat for that Florida State game because
Yeah.
the coaching staff threw him out there as a true freshman, and he got burned on a couple of plays. But you saw the maturation process of him throughout the season, and what happened? He turns into a first round draft pick. So the first of many to come through in the secondary. But it was nice to see the development of Kareem Jackson over those 3 years under the tutelage of Saban.
So I would have to say the next game that we're going to talk about is probably the most memorable Alabama Tennessee game for Alabama fans. I mean, definitely for the younger generation. You might be able to help me with some other games that were more memorable. But the 2009 Rocky Block, Terrence Cody, obviously with the Daniel Moore paintings, and it's still part of the tradition video, I believe. That's a game that and as you talked about before we got on, you don't have that play, you may not win the national championship in 2009.
Nope. No, and you talked about loud moments. That moment when Cody blocks the field goal to preserve the victory, I would say the stadium was equally as loud as the pro throw touchdown. Um, and don't forget, Cody blocked two field goals that
Yep.
game. He had an earlier block too, as well. It's funny. In the last 5 minutes of the game, the media goes down onto the field, and you're on the sidelines for the game, and then you follow the teams in and you wait for the post game press conference. So I was down on the field. Actually, I went down with Aaron Suttles, so Aaron was at the news too as well. So he and I went down together. We stayed together, and then when they lined up for the field goal, we actually went to the end zone, and we were standing basically right behind the goalpost when he made the kick. Here's the thing that I always look at when you look at that play. If you watch the video, if you even look at the picture, or go back and look at the Daniel Moore painting, the parents Cody doesn't block that kick, Julio Jones is going to block that kick because Julio
I was going
Jones,
to ask you that question.
yeah,
Yep.
Julio Jones looks like he's about 15 feet in the air. If you look at how high Julio Jones got, so we were both, Aaron and I both were watching it. When it got blocked for a second, we thought Julio might have been the one that blocked it because we saw the back view of the play. But come to find out, it was Mount Cody. But I don't have much doubt that if Cody doesn't get it, Julio Jones is swatting that thing like Charles Bediako.
Oh yeah. Well, and there's no tell. I mean, just because it got blocked or if it hadn't gotten blocked, it doesn't mean it's going through the uprights. That could have been a pull left or a push right or anything like that.
Absolutely.
The offense definitely sputtered in that game, only putting up 12 points. I remember a big reason for that is Colin Peak got hurt in pregame warmups, our starting tight end. Colin Peak, aka Holla McGee, for those if remember him being on MTV's show Yo Mama or something like that, telling Yo Mama jokes. Um, and I remember William Bly was telling me they were, just doing offensive line work before the game, and all of a sudden Colin Peaks rolling around the ground. He's like, "What are you doing?" And Colin didn't play the game, and Colin was a big part of that offense in the passing game. We had Julio Jones, we had Mark Ingram, we had Trent Richardson, but Colin Peak was also a big part of that offense, and that obviously impacted, I think, not only that game, but what the game plan would have been for that game as well. And we had some other injuries going into that game too. We had that game, and then we were going into the off week, and then would eventually have LSU at home the next week. And I remember there was a lot of conversation of just needing to get to the off week so the team could rest up and get healthy to continue on this push of what they were making towards the national championship that year.
No, that team was tired. They were beat up. They needed the rest. And don't forget, even after the break, they were in a dogfight with LSU into the fourth quarter. So, you look back and say in 2009, Alabama went undefeated, won the national championship. Well, like any championship team, there were some close moments along in that season. And the Tennessee game was definitely one of them. I hope this week is not that case. I mean, Alabama's beaten up. They're coming. They've got still another game after Tennessee. So they're right in the thick of things, similar to what happened to the team back in 2009.
I know of this 15 game streak that we had, we decided to pull out all the really close games to talk about. Going to our next one in 2015, where Tennessee probably thought they really had us at that point. But I love you bringing up the 2015 team because that's what I feel like this Alabama team mimics a lot as well. But that did get a little scary there towards the end with Tennessee having a late touchdown and then us having to answer that late touchdown to eventually pull it out.
So again, almost like 2009, down on the sidelines in 2015, had a close view of the Derrick Henry late touchdown, and then of course the defensive play to actually seal the game when they snuffed out the last attempt by Tennessee. But yes, way closer than anyone thought it was going to be. But again, remember where that Tennessee game falls on the schedule. That's usually toward the end of where the team's really getting tired and getting beaten up. I do find that satisfying, just like the Phil Fulmer being kicked out by Saban, that Peyton Manning was on the sideline to witness Alabama to come back and win. And not only did they win the game, well, like you said, it was a national championship season, so even better. It doesn't fully make up for when Peyton led the band in Legion Field, but I'll take it.
No, but it would be a great week for Ty Simpson, who's a Tennessee native, to get up there and lead Yay Alabama, I think, if we pull it out. Um, I remember from that game, Ardarius Stewart making some huge catches on that last drive. And obviously Derrick Henry, scoring the last touchdown. I also remember once the game was, in hand that Ryan Anderson had, caught I guess it was an interception because the ball was going forward out of Dobbs's hands. But being disappointed that he couldn't keep his feet and score so that that margin of victory could be a little bit more against Tennessee. But that was, again, talking about the 2019 and this 2015, a national championship team that would find ways to win games ugly. And I would say, last weekend we saw that too with Alabama against Missouri. I think the guys were very honest and coaches, it wasn't a perfect game, but you found a way to win. I know Ty Simpson was very critical of his performance in the game, but they are continuing to get better. They're showing that mental toughness. I would, as an Alabama fan, for this current team, when we have opportunities to put teams away in the second half with that first drive, like to see us put points on the board. But similar to that 2015 team, I think this is a tough team that's continuing to just get better and better and better.
Well, and again, I think it starts with the leadership that you're getting from your quarterback too. You actually, even though he's a first-year starter, is what, a 4-year veteran in the program. So you're seeing that play through, and the team has responded well. And look, the team responds to the player that gives them the best chance to win. And he is a distributor. So you see him, dealing, it's like dealing cards. He's giving a card to everybody. So the team responds, and they like that. So uh, need that to continue this weekend. How about that? So. And I agree with you. It's going to mean a lot to him. He's a Tennessee native, so this game is going to mean a lot to him as far as have a good showing, go out there, prove what he can do, and hopefully Alabama to a victory over Tennessee.
So 6:30 kickoff Central Time in Tuscaloosa on ABC. You showed up in the black hoodie last week, and there's been other comments about the black hoodie of death. It's been Club Bryant Denny Stadium at Nick Saban Field with the light shows now going forward. I'm wondering now for Alabama interests in night games, should they just turn all the lights off and maybe have a spotlight on the tunnel and that's it, and just bleed into the darkness and blackout as Coach DeBoer leads the team on the field?
I don't know, but I know this much. We know his wardrobe is set for eternity. He doesn't need to change no matter what. Just keep it as is, and I don't care. 10 years from now, if he's still coaching, he'll still be the 2024 Nike hoodie. So it does, I hope that they gave him a whole case of those things that he can go through.
Well, if anybody's from the university is listening, I think we said this last week, we'll say it again. Um, they need to be reproducing that so that fans can get it.
Yes,
When you're
yes.
looking for ways to fund NIL or do different stuff like that, that's some of the things I think fans would be buying hand over fist right now.
Absolutely, because again, it's last year's, and they're out of stock, and it doesn't look like they're going to make them anymore. But if you want to make some quick money, you definitely need to reissue them right now and sell them at least to the end of the season.
Well, it should be. I'm excited about the game. I expect it to be a high-scoring game. Obviously, Heupel's got a very good offense at Tennessee, but I think their defense is in the last in the SEC related to points given up. It may be a game though that if we can get them some quick three and outs and be ball control offense, that we could put it on them again. That's obviously what we would like to see. Do you have any additional thoughts as far as Saturday night and what you're hoping for, or what you think we need to do?
I, I don't want it to be such a high scoring affair that's like in the 40s. I like what you said, though. Alabama, even though they're a passing team, they have shown in these last three games that they can actually control the time of possession. So in reality, if they could do that with the style that they play, yeah, take a 30-20 game, something like that. That'd be perfectly fine.
Well, it should be a fun day for everybody that's down in Tuscaloosa. Again, 6:30 on ABC. I know everybody be safe getting to the game and leaving the game. What I always remember about playing Tennessee is everybody's going the same direction both before and after the game. So everybody be safe out there. I do want to mention to everybody that Philip Fulmer is a scumbag, and we have appreciated you listening to the Tide Machine. Join us next week as we get into South Carolina. But Michael, appreciate you as always, and roll tide.
Roll Tide.
The Paul W. Bryant Museum is a captivating destination for sports enthusiasts and fans of the University of Alabama football program. Located in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, the museum is dedicated to preserving the legacy of the legendary coach Paul Bear Bryant. The Paul W. Bryant Museum showcases a remarkable collection of memorabilia, including trophies, photographs, and artifacts that span Bryant's career and the rich history of Alabama football. Visitors can explore interactive exhibits and learn about the team's storied past, making the Paul W. Bryant Museum a must-visit for any football aficionado. Fans can also experience exhibits highlighting success of both the Alabama men's basketball and women's softball programs. Open Tuesday through Sunday. Plan your visit today and experience the rich tradition of Alabama athletics. Roll Tide.